In a so-called free state, officials and stakeholders concoct solutions to problems often created by other bureaucrats and with little regard for infringements on the people. These stories are born at the apex of freedom and entrepreneurship. We foolishly advocate for the taxpayer. Brian's Beat presents Freedom Fools.
If people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in.
That's Tucker Carlson. He was speaking at the Turning Points convention last week. And if I were the only person talking about gentrification, that would be one thing. But when Tucker Carlson is talking about it, well, it seems like there's a little bit more weight behind it. Now, I know people that listen to this radio station, they talk about it. They see, they feel what's happening in the city of New Bedford. They know if they are property owners that their property taxes keep going up. They know that their water and sewer and their electric and their heating bills all the time keep going up at a higher clip than they used to. If they are renting out part of their home to somebody else to try to make ends meet, they're charging the other person a little bit more because they are paying a little bit more. That's the way it goes. That's the problem of being a renter. You may not have some of the headaches that the property owner has, but you're still paying out the butt. You know, I'm watching up in the Boston area, there's this trash strike with the company known as Republic. Well, that's another thing. If you live in the greater New Bedford area, I exclude Westport in this particular case, but if you live in Dartmouth and Fairhaven, they're trash trucks that come around on a regular basis to pick up your trash. Well, even the trash hauling business is charging more money because their people need to make more money in order to make their ends meet. We are all a part of what's known as the supply chain. The economy is the supply chain. That's Alvin Toffler, not me, Alvin Toffler. The economy is the supply chain. So guys like the man who called toward the end of last hour, he's getting out of this crap state to go down to Florida. Well, how many other guys like him, whether they think it's a crap state or they want better weather, whatever the case may be, they're heading to Florida or Texas or the Carolinas. Carolinas might be a better proposition to talk about at this particular time because, quite frankly, they never expected a lot of people from the Northeast to come flooding down to their area. They were an area where people escaped for better work. They came up north to the Rust Belt for jobs. Well, down in the South, they don't have all of the jobs. Florida is a little bit different. They've been at the game for 30 some odd years. But they don't have enough schools for all the people that are going down there. And they're now taxing folks more money because they have more students. And of course, back when the federal government was footing quite a bit of sum of money for those bills, you know, it was okay. But now going to be an entirely different story. I'm curious at what's going to happen when that guy who thinks I'm a liberal is going to make his way down there. And don't you like how I'm qualified as a liberal? Because I didn't vote for Donald Trump. Well, if that's the qualifier, then I sit here proudly as a liberal. 508-996-0500. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Brian. I was at that meeting with Dana Ribeiro, and I saw you there. That was at BCC.
It was BCC? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and ultimately, she could have been a force to oppose gentrification, which she seemed to be doing with the meeting. But you know what happened subsequently? The mayor offered her a job in the windmill business, and she took it and dropped out of politics. So I'm not a fan of hers anymore. She was bought off. But as far as gentrification is concerned, a caller to one of your talk shows months ago when the mayor was on the air answering questions, the caller called in and said, I'm a taxpayer. Actually, if rent stabilization were imposed, my taxes would stay stable or go down because property values were going down. Without rent stabilization, everything's inflating higher and higher. So the mayor responds, he says, well, that's good. When you sell your property, you'll get more money for it. The guy answered, I don't want to sell my property. I want to live the rest of my life in New Bedford and pay lower taxes. And I'm not going to get it because there's nothing stopping gentrification, inflation. Well, what do you think of that, Brian?
I'd never heard of gentrification, inflation. It's a mouthful.
It is. The property values
no, I get it. I've just never heard the term before.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, that guy was in pain from it. A couple of weeks ago, somebody called in and said, I can't understand it. I'm in Bedford. This year, my taxes are $2,000 higher than they were last year. I think that the city council, in trying to show they caught the budget, are responding to angry taxpayers whose assessments are, shaving off their savings and security. And the city council is making a symbolic move to protect their own positions in the future in voting, and
then changing their mind on the Z.
They're not changing their mind. There's not much they can do about the city expenses that really need to be funded, etc. But they want to get reelected and appear to the taxpayers that they are, fighting tax increases with budget cuts. And we're seeing that it's pretty much all talk and no action.
That is exactly what it is. And I pointed that out the other day. You've got Shane Burgo and you've got the mayor. They're yipping and yapping back and forth. Look what happened.
But my point is rent stabilization would have helped the tax-paying homeowners because it would devalue them, or at least in their opinion, and the assessors would be giving them a better deal than they are. So, not everybody wants their property to be sold.
If I'm understanding correctly, you believe, or at least the other person believed, that if the rents were stabilized, that's going to keep the property value of the home or the assessed value of the home from going up?
Yes, because the outside interests will not be interested in going to New Bedford to do deals there because they're not going to get maximum profits from it. So that would deflate Mayor Mitchell's, city on the hill ideal that a lot of well-to-do people would come here revitalize the city and especially pay higher taxes on everything, which he wants. He's revenue hungry.
I'm not quite sure. Again, each deal when it comes to rent stabilization is different, from one town or city to the next. But I do believe that when a new owner comes in, just like a new tenant comes in, the valuation starts afresh. So I'm not sure that if that owner eventually sold the property to somebody else, I know in this particular case he doesn't want to do that, but it still allows for a certain amount of increase each and every year.
And what good will that do you when the inflation, as you point out, home ownership and renting is inflated everywhere? Where do you go? The only place to go really is in the middle of the Midwest, where all the industry and the self-employed farmers are gone due to agribusiness and departure of the auto business, etc. So prices are lower there, but then the average drive to get to a grocery store is 30 miles.
One of the things, your point is well taken. One of the things that we have learned throughout the history, 250 some odd years of the United States of America, is that if people go one place and they need supplies, commodities, whatever the case may be, there is always somebody willing to put up a storefront in order to meet that need. So as you were stating, it might not be there now, but it won't be long before somebody says, hey, I can make a buck by going out there. That is one of the greatest things about capitalism. Many thanks for your call. I do appreciate it. Let us continue. This is Freedom Fools on WBSM. What are the things? I listened to Tucker Carlson. I'm not a big fan, or I was not a big fan. I think what it was, I wasn't a fan of Tucker Carlson when he was on Fox News because he still had to go along to get along, especially at the number one time slot that he was in. But since Tucker has become independent, he is saying things that he may have thought before and may have wanted to express before. But now that he's on his own, the Tucker Carlson network, he is able to do so. And I was watching him because he gave a speech at the Turning Points convention the other day, and it was amazing to hear him talk about gentrification. And he made some excellent points. One in particular is that today's youth, when I say youth, I should be, well, what do we call them? The millennials, 27 to 35, that area right there. They cannot, in mass, they cannot afford to buy a house. Now, those are our kids. My children fall into that age category. One of them has a house. He bought a house at a good time in the city of New Bedford. He could not buy that house that he has in Dartmouth or Fairhaven. Also, and I say it like that, also as ocean communities, because we are pretty much an ocean type family. He could not afford to do it. His younger brother, 33 years old, last week, he cannot afford on his school teacher salary, plus owning a small business with his fiance, they cannot afford to buy a house. Fiance went out and bought a rental property so she can at least recoup her rent. But the couple, they cannot now afford to go out and buy a house. She's a nurse. He's a teacher. They also, besides the rental property, they also own a business. Can you imagine all that? And look, I bring them up. There are people that are in better financial positions, but they still cannot buy a house. And these two are not in a bad financial strait, but they are in our backyard. They cannot afford to buy a house and then, start a family. How many folks, when you've got one or two or three children, want to be renters? Most folks would want to own a home. And I don't mean McMansion. You want a home. I'm not talking about the white picket fence or anything. You want a home. How many people today between the ages of 25, 27, and 40 can afford to go out and buy that home today? Especially if you don't want to leave your community. I do see for sale signs up in New Bedford, but they're few and far between. I do see for sale signs up in Fairhaven. I saw two the other day when I was in Acushnet. I saw one when I was in Rochester. I saw one when I was in Mattapoisett. Now, I'm not trying to say I went through every street in all of these communities. But the fact of the matter is, there are not too many properties for sale at this particular time. Why are people holding on? Your guess is as good as mine. Probably because if they sell and they end up renting, they're going to watch the rental prices go up and up and up and up. And then there are the people that are coming in from outside the Commonwealth, outside of the United States, coming into our backyard. Never mind the people that are coming down from the Boston area. Where do you put them all? And what about your homegrown community? I get a bad feeling. It's a bad taste in my mouth that things, hopefully they get better, but I think they're going to get a lot worse before they get better.
To change something, you must build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
If people don't own things, they don't feel ownership of the country they're in.
Wow. What do you think of that comment from Tucker Carlson? He made it at Turning Points a few days ago. In fact, I think I'm going to use that as a quote of the day. I mean, I think that is so rich. If people don't own it, they don't remember exactly what he said, but I know enough about what he said. I think he hits home. And it's interesting because what do we have going on here in the backyard? Removal of folks that are undocumented. They have no ownership claim, and so they're easy to remove or try to round up. I wonder if we said you could come here if you can afford to buy a property. If that would make things different. You know, by the way, you do know the United States of America does have a residency investment program, which can also lead to citizenship. So in other words, if you can afford to buy a property or make an investment in a business, then you can get into this country without any problem. And The same thing happens in many nations if you are a U.S. citizen. You go to many South American and Asian countries and you make an investment, you're in like Flynn. Now, you may not get citizenship right away. There are some programs where you can buy a property, $350,000, $400,000, $500,000, and you can get citizenship. It'll, take some paperwork time to turn around, but sometimes within that month, you'll get the paperwork that you are a citizen of that nation. Now, I don't think it works like that here in the United States, but, maybe some of these people that are coming here illegally, if they really flash the money, instead of paying all these coyotes, they pay to buy a property, say in New Bedford, probably get a nice 6-family for $600,000, $700,000. That'd be okay, right? Better still, would you be okay with that? See, here's the thing about gentrification. You either want the people to come in to be tourists and see your area, go to the Zeiterion, check out the Whaling Museum, do that kind of stuff. You want people to come in and be a part of the fabric of the community. So they work at a store or they own a store. They own a fishing vessel. Or they could do fishing charters. Who knows? They could revitalize one of these factories. They can convert the factory into housing, whatever the case may be. Maybe they have high-tech skills. See, I'm one of those who talks to people from Guatemala, talks to people from El Salvador, talks to people from some of these other communities that we think, well, they're living on dirt floors, and some of them do. But many of them are highly educated, but there is no place for them to exercise that education where they're from. And so they try to come here to the United States, but they get clumped into the category of, they're here illegally. You know the story. If they were to come up with X amount of money instead of paying the coyotes, because they pay those coyotes a steep sum of money, enough money that maybe they could throw down a down payment on a property. Now you got an entirely different ballgame. Look how many different buildings are boarded up in the city of New Bedford. You can get some of these buildings dirt cheap, certainly by today's economy. Would you be okay with that? There are people from the United States who are looking for a lower cost of living and a better lifestyle, more relaxed lifestyle, and they're leaving the United States just for that reason. And one of the big places folks go, our neighbor to the south, Mexico. Why? Lower cost of living, which includes foods, and from what I have experienced, really high quality food, not a lot of additives or that kind of stuff injected into the foods, locally sourced, locally grown produce, cows. I guess avocados would be part of the produce. And although people tend to work at a much slower pace down there, the job eventually gets done. And many people from the United States of America have made their way down to Mexico. Have you Have you noticed what's been going on in Mexico City? Have you had the opportunity to pay attention to this? Because it's huge. It's big news worldwide.
More than 1.6 million U.S. citizens reside in Mexico, according to the U.S. State Department. The high cost of living in the U.S. is said to be the catalyst that's pushed roughly 11,000 Americans to migrate to Mexico just last year. Protesters are also upset with the government for policies that they say favor wealthier newcomers without considering the communities that have lived in the area.
Yeah, I got that from Reuters, and I've seen newscasts. A lot of it I really can't understand unless there is a crawl underneath in English. But I do know pictures pretty well, as the picture of President Trump burned in effigy. Folks are throwing firecrackers inside Starbucks. Protesters carrying signs that read, "Here we speak Spanish." My goodness, doesn't it sound so familiar to what's going on here? Not the firecrackers, not the burning of the Mexican president in effigy, but how about, here we speak English. There they're saying, hey, we speak Spanish. Here's something else that they're saying, which I have to admit is kind of true. Gringos, stop stealing our homes. Here's one that I know will hit home. You know how we complain time and again about illegals getting shelter, clothing, food, and other things, medical care, courtesy of our tax dollars and the different governments? In Mexico City, there is a huge sign that said, "No more services in Mexico." Your new home is an invasion. How many times have you heard, whether it's coming from the Trump administration or MAGA folks or folks here on WBSM, how many times have you heard about when the illegals were coming in masse, how it was an invasion? So they're saying the same thing down in Mexico that folks are saying up here. Oh, how about this one? Now, here's one I have not heard attributed to illegals coming to Massachusetts or the United States. You are a colonizer, not an effing expat. Get out of Mexico. Well, we certainly know that the Trump administration is trying to do its best to get illegals to just get out of the United States. So what I'm getting at here is we see our housing prices go up. A lot of that has been attributed to the fact that we have an influx of migrants, use the term, whatever you'd like, coming here. We're worried about migrants from the greater Boston area coming down to New Bedford, making the housing prices go up. What I'm explaining here is this is not just happening in greater New Bedford, not just happening in the greater Boston area, not just happening in the Commonwealth, not just happening in Florida and California and Alaska and in Texas. This is happening all over the place. If I were to say Barcelona, Spain, it's happening in Barcelona, Spain. Many people, digital nomads, people who can work from just about any place as long as they have an internet connection. They are leaving. They'll stay at an Airbnb for X amount of weeks or days or months, and then they pack up their bags and they leave. Well, one of the great things about being a digital nomad is, depending on what country you're from, I'm just going to say you're from the United States because that's where we are. That's where we're from. If you are a digital nomad from the United States and you go to Mexico, since it's right to the south of us, you can go down there, and as long as the income that you're making comes from wherever but outside of Mexico, you're not paying any income tax on your income because it's not sourced from Mexico. It's the same in Portugal. It's the same in many other nations. Lisbon, Portugal, has experienced so much, what's the proper term to say here? So many digital nomads that they're busting at the seams, and the local people can't find a place to rent because a lot of these digital nomads, whether they're going through the Airbnb route or they're renting an apartment for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, that's an apartment that a local cannot get a hold of, cannot afford. And the digital nomad, it will pay a little bit more in rent for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months compared to what the local will pay for the whole year. That digital nomad, because he or she is not a resident of Lisbon, Portugal, they're not paying any Portuguese income tax. And then they go on to the next place. Nothing wrong with it. I highly recommend it. I talk to many people about doing just such a thing. But the repercussion is you're nudging out the locals. And the locals don't like it because you're not even paying taxes. And we don't like it here when the illegal comes here and is living off the dole and not paying into the system. And I often wonder what it would be like if that illegal were allowed to come into the United States. You're not going to try to ship them out. So they end up getting a job and they're getting a regular W-2 or W-4, whatever that is. And they're having taxes deducted from their paycheck every week, every other week, twice a month, whatever the case may be. Would you feel differently? I'm not talking about voting, but I'm talking now they are paying what we would call their fair share, whatever that really means. Would that be different? Or does it still lead to the gentrification that we're talking about and that we are realistically worried about? There is a fear, but this particular fear is not false evidence appearing real, because it is happening. And we do see what happens to people in the backyard who cannot find housing, cannot afford housing that they do find, and they're living in their Buick. I still see people every once in a while when I go by BJ's, the same cars parked in the parking lot over there. And I'm sure it's happening the same at the Walmart. It's not that they don't work. They cannot afford a place to live. Should that be your problem? And to what extent should that be your problem? If they're in the Walmart parking lot, if they're in the BJ's parking lot, the Dartmouth Mall parking lot, whatever the case, that's on the owner of those facilities or their property manager. If they are parking on a side street, I'm going to say crossroad. If they're parking on Penniman, if they're parking on Main Street in Fairhaven, now that's an entirely different story. What do you want the city or the town to do about it. We're talking about people, they're not trying to be bums. They can't afford a place to live. They're working a job. They're trying to save up. They may have their kids staying with other family members while they try to get through this stretch of time. What are you suggesting? I have played bits and pieces here about what's going on in Mexico. Here's another piece from Mexico. That this is happening right now. You probably don't know about it because, quite frankly, I haven't seen the major news broadcasters covering this story. I started paying attention the second time around. The first time around, I said, oh, okay, so this is happening in Mexico City. Come to find out, it's not just happening in Mexico City. And it's not just happening in Mexico. They're experiencing similar problems that we see right here. The difference is these folks are taking to the streets and they're getting angry.
The reason we've gathered here is precisely to hear the thoughts of many victims, mainly young people today, for whom it's almost impossible to live, to find housing. It's not just that. We're living the consequences of gentrification, which is the government directing its public policies towards people with higher purchasing power, often illegally displacing local population who have lived in these neighborhoods for 40, 50, and we have documented cases of up to 60 years.
And so it begs the question, these protesters are out in the streets, they're protesting. Can you imagine folks out in the streets of New Bedford doing something similar? I'm not talking about throwing chairs through windows. Although when push comes to shove, people get upset in the heat of the moment and they go wild. That's what I was watching in Mexico, and I've seen this happen in other places. So have you. So have you. In fact, they're rioting and you name the destination. The people in Mexico City, they want real estate regulation. They want rent control. They want limits on foreign property ownership. Personally, I don't want to see them get any of that. Not that I plan on moving to Mexico City, but I feel sorry for them. I really do. But if it happens there, you can bet it's going to happen in your backyard. You can bet that Dartmouth and Fairhaven and New Bedford and Freetown, all the communities, Fall River, they're going to say, well, maybe look, if they can do rent control in Mexico because they have United States people going down there, then we should be able to do rent control here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let's vote on it. We should be able to do rent control in New Bedford, in Fall River, in Dartmouth. Is that what you want? Do you want the state to have more control over real estate? Do you want limits on people from other countries being able to buy property in the United States? Do you? Because I get the feeling we're going to be headed in this direction. I just get that feeling. I don't want to make it sound like Donald Trump is going to put us in that direction, but I think that the repercussions after Donald Trump, I see what's going on in New York City with the so-called front runner for mayor. I see the momentum that AOC is getting. I never thought much of Bernie Sanders, but everywhere he goes to speak, the crowds get larger and larger and larger. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be president of the United States, but he could certainly be known as the godfather of that movement.
We are coming to get our check.
Not that it's bad that rich people are getting richer. It's bad that everyone else is getting poorer. And it's especially bad the young people can't afford homes.
Tucker Carlson is absolutely correct. It's bad that the poorer people can no longer afford to buy a home. I can recall back in the 1960s, mid 1960s, my mom, one person, single parent, went out and bought our house, the house that I grew up in, graduated high school and college, living in that house. $19,000. I don't know what the down payment or any of that kind of stuff was. That house is worth pretty close to $1 million now. Yeah, I know we're talking almost 60 years ago, but still, can you imagine? Can you imagine if she tried to sell it? She'd have to pay capital gains. Whew. Unbelievable. And that's just normal. That's, a person in a house. I can only imagine what the property tax on that house is right now. There are people that I talk to in the city of New Bedford that are paying $4,000. I don't know if that's high or low for their property tax. It seems kind of low, but, I'm thinking it's a city. Maybe that's just the way it is. But imagine if you are the owner of a 4-family, what the property tax on that must be. Of course, you're renting out some of the units, but every time the tax goes up, the tax bill, that's what you care about. You're not sitting there wondering, well, did my property value go up, or did the per, dollar per go up? What amounts to the assessed value? You just know that you're paying more money each and every year. That's what you care about, and that's what the tenants care about, because they wonder, why is my rent going up? Why is my water and sewer going up? Especially if, if the tenants that have a place all-inclusive, your landlord is definitely including a higher water and sewer bill, a higher electricity bill, because they're getting the same thing. Imagine what happens when these smart meters come out. What do you think is going to happen then? I'm trying to get somebody from Eversource to come on to the program to let us know when we can expect the smart meters. It's overbearing. That's what it is. Hello.
Brian, it's you.
It might be.
Okay. Yeah. Again, how much did your mother pay for the house when she bought it?
19 and change.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not bad at all. But if I were you, I'd be the one that would be upset.
Why?
Because look all the generational wealth that you lost out on.
I took advantage. I rented it out for a while, and then I sold it because I needed to do something else.
Yeah. Well, you would have had that generational wealth. So you did gain something with it. So that's good.
Oh, yeah.
Look,
the profit made on that house was, I'll just be honest with you. I sold it for $285.
Okay.
In
cashed in.
Oh, yeah, in the early 2000s. Yeah, I got a great deal, sold it to some great people, and I told them, look, down the road, if you ever want to sell, let me know, because I'd be interested in buying it back.
Not anymore.
Well, you know what? Worse, the husband died The wife, had other things in her mind and never let me know.
Yeah, I lost on a couple properties the exact same way.
Yeah.
So I know the feeling, but unfortunately, here in New Bedford anyway, it's a shame that more folks didn't realize how good they had it, and they chose not to buy in at the time when it was affordable.
I don't know each and every person, but maybe they didn't have the credit in order to do it. I don't know. But you're right. You try to capitalize.
I knew quite a few of my friends who had the ability to buy, and I, on multiple occasions, would tell them, hey, you should grab something. But they were more interested in having a good time and having the latest, greatest gadgets and cars. And unfortunately, these are some of the same people now complaining of how expensive or how they can no longer live in their neighborhood. Talk about gentrification. I know the area I came up in, there's not many people that look like me there anymore. It's very interesting and sad at the same time. But when you get out of the area, there's quite a bit of time out of the area. I couldn't wait to get back because I knew it was more affordable here. That's why I chose to come back and buy a house here and subsequently bought more properties here. But it's something that I realized and looked at a long time ago. And this has come fruition, and here we are. But the prices of housing is absolutely insane, not only here, but everywhere else. We were lucky because it took us a long time to catch up or get caught up because we were still the bargain for the longest time. And now it's been discovered, and here we are.
I often wonder about that. Thank you very much for your call. I do appreciate it. I wonder how this area escaped everybody. I mean, the North Shore outside of Boston, people know about and flock to, and the prices are extremely high up in that area. And Metro West, of course, because of its proximity, South Shore. How did the area from...
Class is now in session, and the UPS Store is here to help you ace arriving on campus. Our certified packing experts can pack everything you need, from desktops to decor. Plus, when you pack and ship with us, you get our exclusive pack and ship guarantee. Your items arrive safe or your money back. Restrictions and limitations apply. To get a 20% off packing coupon and for full details, visit theupsstore.com/package.